The spirit of innovation is deeply ingrained in America, and Google is helping Americans innovate in ways both big and small. Central Texas Regional Mobility Authority is using Google AI to create smarter tolling systems and improve traffic flow for Texans. This is a new era of American innovation. Find out more at g.co/American innovation.
At Sierra, you'll always find apparel, footwear, and gear for 20 to 60% less than department and specialty store prices. But right now, it's clearance time, so you can save even more on everything you need to get active and outside. Visit your local Sierra store today.
After Zoomies at the dog park, it's time for Drive Up at Target. In goes a big bag of kibble and one squeaky chicken toy for the good boy. Drive Up that's ready when you are, only in the Target app. Just tap Target.
Hello and welcome to 1865, the Nottingham Forest Podcast, with me, Rich Ferraro. As you will have experienced a few weeks ago, although we're not doing regular podcasts, we are still bringing occasional bits of content into your feed. And if you haven't heard the most recent special podcast we've done, then I do recommend them. They are a retrospective on some of the various shirts that Forest have worn since the European Cup winning days. And also, the big one was an interview with the one, the only, the legend that is Nigel Clough. So if you haven't heard those, then go back into your podcast app, or you can visit 1865.football to find out more. Anyway, today we are having a little bit of a roundup because it seems as though there's been lots happening in the transfer market, in the world of the club generally. And so I'm joined by a couple of our regulars. First of all, we've got Tom Newton. How you doing, Tom?
I'm good, thank you.
Also, we are joined by Adam. Now, Adam, over the last year or so, we've mostly heard you talking about the women's team. Just very quickly on that topic, the women's team are making some signings, aren't they? And again, just like we predicted, they're signing players who've got a bit of a track record at the higher level that they will be competing at this season.
Yes, it's really exciting. It comes down to the fact that this is what the women's team has been doing. They pluck players from higher divisions and think, we're going to do really well. Like I'm not saying the Wrexham model. I don't want to say it like that, but it's not a bad comparison to use, I suppose. We haven't got film stars though, unfortunately.
Well, it's only a matter of time, surely. You get Vicky McClure involved.
Yeah, exactly.
And we're recording this on Thursday, the 17th of July, and it's been announced that Arsenal have signed the first ever £1 million player in the women's game. And it just got me thinking, I'm pretty certain, especially if Forest get promoted this season, I can see Forest really splashing the cash that as part of, Marinakis's commitment to success for everything that's got a Forest badge on it, yeah?
Yeah, for sure. It's exciting time to watch the Forest women's team. I mean, women's football in general, had a massive boost. Like the women's Euros have been fantastic so far, other than the France game for England. But we don't talk too much about that one. But as we're recording, this is quarterfinals tonight, so really excited for that.
Now, before we get started with talking about Forest, just a very, very brief word about one of the big football stories that affected, I think, everyone in the game, which was the sudden death of Diogo Jota. Adam, I think you're the one who broke it to us in our group chat, and it's such a shock, wasn't it?
Absolutely surreal. I mean, I can't believe something like that's happened. Such a wonderful footballer. His teammates said he was such a wonderful person as well. Him and his brother. It's a massive tragedy. I think from all of us, condolences to their family. I can't imagine what the family's going through losing both of them. He's obviously got a young family, that sort of thing as well. It was a true football tragedy, unfortunately.
Yeah, it really was. And obviously that whole brought home even more by the fact he'd had essentially one of the best summers of his life. Lifting a trophy for Portugal. He's lifted the trophy with Liverpool, and most importantly, got married to the mother of his 3 kids. And so, Tom, it just brings home, doesn't it, that ultimately footballers are still human beings, aren't they?
Yeah, and I was really just echoing what Adam says. It's really sad, and like you say, got 10 years ago prior to his death and everything. And you just don't know in this world what's around the corner. And one of the reasons why he was driving to get to the ferry, because he just had like a routine surgery, and the doctors have told him not to fly. So he's like get the ferry, and obviously his life's tragically cut short. And he was just a brilliant player. He scored quite a few goals against us for Wolves in Liverpool, and he scored the equaliser. I think it was his first touch when we played him in January. Yes, such a brilliant player, and he's a sad loss to his family.
And crucially, from my perspective, it's quite rare, isn't it, that you get a footballer where you don't hear a bad word said about them, either in terms of their ability or what they're like as a person. And so I echo what everyone else has been saying and what you two both said, which is obviously massive condolences to the family, and also a big shock to the Liverpool fans and Wolves fans who I know. So we'll get back to talking about Forest, though. Because in the meantime, while that big news story broke, things have been rumbling on in the world of Nottingham Forest. And the big one at the moment is this whole saga about Europa League. Now, Forest, as things stand, are in the Europa League. Palace are going to the Court of Arbitration for Sport. Adam, can you give us a little bit of if in case any of our listeners have arrived from outer space, can you give us a bit of a potted history about why Palace feel that they should still be in the Europa League?
Yeah, of course. So Palace's argument is that they won the FA Cup. You win the FA Cup, you automatically qualify for the Europa League. Now, the issue has come from, and it's really interesting because we actually have quite a good comparison with our ownership scheme, that you're not allowed to have two of the same teams in the same competition. Now, John Textor, who's a name we've all heard quite a few times recently, knew about this. He knew the possibility of Crystal Palace winning the FA Cup and didn't act in the way that Marinakis did, where Marinakis sold part of the club to somebody else. It really much abusing a grey area rather than actually selling the club. But moving his shares to somebody else, that means that if Forest and Olympiacos were in the same competition, it would have been fine. So Palace had the same opportunity to do so. I suppose their argument would maybe be that winning a trophy like the FA Cup isn't as easy as... It's not as easy to predict that. It's not as easy to predict that you're going to go and beat Man City in the FA Cup final, is it? So I get that side of things. I think for me, my general outlook on this is that I really feel for the Palace fans. I know that they've been giving Forest absolute pelters on social media, but I think for them, it's really rubbish. And the rule itself is there for a reason. I know there's a lot of people that don't believe the rule should exist. It is there for a reason. And I feel that I get a lot of stick for saying this as a Forest fan. I do think that Palace should retain their spot in the Europa League. It is only fair. It is the system, and unfortunately, the fans are the ones that suffer.
Okay, Tom is aching to make his opinion heard. I mean, I'm just going to throw in my two penneth here, which is that I think that if I was a Palace fan, I would be absolutely gutted. As a Forest fan, do I want this to be the way in which we get into a higher level competition? Absolutely not. But the bottom line is that it might be an administrative rule, but it's a rule that existed and it's fairly clear. Now, Steve Parish is claiming a couple of things. Firstly, he's talking about the whole notification thing. You've talked about Texter. Parish is clearly not an emailer. And what I would also say is that there's the issue of, how much control does Texter have at Palace, and that's a big bone of contention that I think Palace are going to go to the Court of Arbitration for Sports with. But Tom, how do you feel about the whole saga?
I think if you go back with point deduction, what we got, no sympathy, we broke the rules, we took the 4 points deduction, we tried to get it like COVID through the courts. Didn't happen, did it? And I just think if you are somebody like Steve Parish, who's high up at Crystal Palace in the administration role, ownership, I think it's a bit of a... I don't think it's going to wash, is it? I didn't see an email. I mean, come on, it's not like emails are new thing in like the workplace or organisations, and he's running £1 billion operation here in terms of Palace. Obviously, the revenue over the years they've had from them, and he hasn't read an email. I just think it's just a bit.
We've got some breaking news, which is that Tottenham are claiming that they did approach Nottingham Forest, and they sent an email to info@nottinghamforest.co.uk to make an approach for Morgan Gibbs White. I mean, it's just ridiculous, isn't it? It's again. in multi-million-pound businesses, you can't afford to have a break in the admin chain like that, can you?
No, if you're like buying a house or something, and you've been asked to like sign a document, and you don't sign that document, and the deadline passes, there's a high chance you're not going to get your desired house, and it's going to fall through. And it's the same thing here. I do feel for Crystal Palace of obviously what's happened at their club, but it's not our fault. It's that saying, isn't it? Fail to prepare, prepare to fail. And when they got past Millwall, for example, they should have thought there's a distinct possibility that we may get to the final. It may not happen, but let's get things in order. Then if it does happen, we're prepared for it. They didn't do that. They've missed the deadline, and Crystal Palace need to vent their anger at their football club rather than us and UEFA, because UEFA put the rules there. It's happened at other clubs, so why should Crystal Palace be exempt from that rule? So but I do feel for Crystal Palace fans, but it's not our fault.
Yeah, and it's not the fans' fault either, is it? And Adam, just on that topic, I mean, I think it's fair to say that as far as I can tell from the media coverage, and to be honest, I don't like going on social media anymore. It's not a fun place to be most of the time. But from what I've seen of the media coverage, there's a huge number of people, including people who are actually paid journalists and commentators and pundits, who are spectacularly missing the point about why Palace have had their European place downgraded to Conference League.
They are, and I think that there's a lot of clubs that have got multi-club ownership. You've got Palace, you've got like Man City with like Girona and their whole scheme. Chelsea with Strasbourg. It does exist. It's something that is modern day football. Multi-club ownership is modern day football. But when you're given the rules, every club's aware of the rules. You know exactly what you need to do to comply. You know exactly what happens. When Lyon got their relegation, the whole of France rallied around them. PSG paid them early for Bradley Barcola. They had everyone's support, and they've retained their place in Ligue 1, which is great, and they obviously get the European football. But on the other side of that coin, surely Palace should have been more prepared. Now, I think my point being that I feel sorry for their fans it is definitely how I feel. Am I going to be really happy that we're in a higher competition if that is the decision? Of course I am, because I'm a Forest fan. I want us to play in the highest possible level of football. So of course I'm going to be happy, and we're going to reap the benefits of that. But I think as a football club, Palace, one, can't make that mistake. Two, the media portrayal that Marinakis is some big puppet master who's playing UEFA by the string is absolutely nonsense. It's got nothing to do with us. It's UEFA that have found them guilty. It's UEFA that have said you've broke our rules. Marinakis hasn't knocked on their door and said, "Oh, by the way, Palace has broke your rules." It is quite baffling how we're portrayed as the bad guy in this when we haven't actually done anything.
Tom?
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, Adam. And another thing is that with Marinakis, all he's asked is clarification from UEFA about the multi-club ownership. That's all he's asked. But then the media have obviously spun it around and say, "Oh, he's the bad guy. He's going to UEFA and trying to kick certain teams out of certain competitions." And like you say, it's nonsense. And Marinakis wouldn't do that. All he's bothered about is Olympiacos and Forest in this instance, and all he's asked is for clarification. He's probably done them a favour in a way, thinking not to make it more murky in the next few seasons. It's we know what's happening now in terms of the rulings and what to do, and that's all he's asked for, and then everybody's turned around and it's his fault.
Well, yeah, and of course, there's all kinds of conspiracy theories that can go around, not just involving Marinakis, but I mean, bottom line, I would also say is that Forest, when they have broken the rules, most notably with PSR, they may have had arguments about whether it was fair or not, but ultimately the club have taken their medicine with various fines, points deductions, and so on and so forth. So in that respect, although Marinakis is a disruptor, ultimately when you have to take your medicine, you take it, don't you? So now, speaking of misinformed commentary on various events, the other thing that brings me towards is the whole thing to do with Morgan Gibbs-White. Now, Tom, I'm going to come to you on this one because I asked Adam to give me a summary of the Palace situation. The Morgan Gibbs-White situation is also incredibly complex, isn't it? So we know that Tottenham have made a bid which apparently meets this release clause of 60 million, but there's issues about potentially the confidentiality of the clause, or potentially the way in which the payments are structured? We don't 100% know, and that's what's making it a bit more murky, isn't it? Because ultimately, the only people who really know are Morgan and his agent and Nottingham Forest Football Club.
Yeah, this has been the thing in football, what's been happening in the last few years. I always was under the assumption that you can't, after what happened with Ashley Cole going to Chelsea from Arsenal, tapping up and all that, I thought you couldn't tap up players. And you see it in like the gossip column on BBC, or they've agreed terms, they just need to
approach the club.
Approach the club or agree a fee. And so my thinking of it is that they've just assumed that there's the release clause, and Tottenham were just going to pay it. But by all accounts, Forest have to still give permission to Spurs to speak to Morgan Gibbs-White. And obviously, reading between the lines, it seems that his agent and himself have obviously leaked that to Spurs and gone the other way rather than the protocol. It's just you just want like some clarity on it now, don't you, in terms of enclosure. Like, I think majority of the Forest fans know that Morgan Gibbs-White's days as a Forest player is limited. I think he will get his move, but it depends what's happened between Spurs and Forest regarding the true valuation of Morgan Gibbs-White. But I just think it's to lose Elanga was seismic in the same window, but to lose Morgan Gibbs-White, and we'll talk about it no doubt in a few minutes, is that there's not many players coming in, and we already needed a bigger squad with them to leave, and before them two were leaving, and now them two are leaving, it's an even bigger.
Yeah, we will come back to that in a little while. But Adam, I mean, from your perspective, so Morgan's been pictured coming into pre-season training and all of that. I do think that for the sake of his own career, he's not likely to down tools. I think he's probably still going to be 100%er while he's still wearing a red shirt or a red training kit. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm disappointed by the reaction of Forest fans, to be honest, by Gibbs-White, and I might be in the minority there, but you look at those training pictures and people commenting like snake emojis and all that sort of stuff. Ultimately, at this point in time, he hasn't come out and said anything. He hasn't commented on it. The club haven't publicly commented on it. I think that they must, because the way the release clauses work is obviously if you trigger a release clause, the club have got no say. Now, this all goes into the legalities of stuff, and it's stuff that we're definitely not privy to. But I would imagine that if Spurs knew about the release clause and triggered it, it would have been quite a simple process of saying to Morgan, "Do you want to come to Spurs?" And if he says yes, he's already a Tottenham player by the time we're recording this. So it's clearly not as cut and dry as that. And one big question I have as well is that the whole structure of the deal from signing from Wolves was 42 million, whatever it might have been in the end. What bright spark is thought, let's put a £60 million release clause in if you're going to spend 40 plus million on a player? It seems an obscenely low amount to put a release clause in. Now, it might not have been from the start of the contract. It might have been when you hit X amount of games for Forest, then there's a release clause, or when you've been with us for this long, then you've got a release clause. I get that. I think it's frustrating that that's even been put in the first place. And I think now that we're in this position, I want it to be resolved fairly quickly and Morgan leave in the next couple of days, or him sign a new contract in the next couple of days. What I don't want to do is keep him for the next month, play the first game, and then get dragged out all summer. We don't know if we have to go for a high-profile replacement. We end up with no one, and then we're the ones that are kicking ourselves.
Yeah. And that thing about the 60 million clause, I agree. It seems low. I mean, I was trying to kind of contextualize it a little bit and just kind of think, okay, so bearing in mind the initial fee was 25 million, 60 million as a release clause, if that's all we were paying, probably pretty good. A year ago, when Forest had 2 seasons of being threatened with relegation, 60 million seemed fair in terms of it's like a release clause if we get relegated or something like that. You kind of go, okay, I understand that. But bearing in mind that the time that Forest have had and the sort of situation as well where they've paid more or less the full amount now for Gibbs-White is coming up to like 42 million or something at the moment, isn't it? And you just think, well, that's not much extra money, is it, if we're selling him for 60 million? Tom, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. But another thing is that what's been doing the rounds over the last couple of days is that now we're in the Europa League or European competition, that release clause doesn't exist. I don't know how true it is. I'm sure I've seen that. But I just, it's in it, like we've mentioned, it just needs sorting out. But the thing is now, though, is that with this money we've got from Elanga, what was it, 55 million all in or something like that, 60 million on top with if Gibbs White, if and when he goes. It's the worst thing what could happen to the club now, because the club, other clubs know that we've got over 100 million spare cash burning a hole in our pocket kind of thing, and they're just going to put like an extra 10. It's going to be like a Forest tax, isn't it? They've got money, and 10 million might go on, and you'd be like Adam just said, you don't want this dragging on until the end of the summer, and then we're panic buying and we get dross in. And you don't know if a player's going to be dross until they actually kick a ball, but you want to have like a bit of a plan in place, don't you, to actually know the profile of the player. But you don't want to get to, like, say, 31st of August and we're still scratching around and we're just like waste a load of money, and it's not good for anybody in my eyes.
Okay, we'll come back to that theme in just a few minutes after this.
Close your eyes, exhale, feel your body relax, and let go of whatever you're carrying today.
Well, I'm letting go of the worry that I wouldn't get my new contacts in time for this class. I got them delivered free from 1-800-CONTACTS. Oh my gosh, they're so fast.
And breathe.
Oh, sorry. I almost couldn't breathe when I saw the discount they gave me on my first order. Oh, sorry. Namaste.
Visit 1-800-CONTACTS.com today to save on your first order.
1-800-CONTACTS.
You're listening to 1865, the Nottingham Forest Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to 1865, the Nottingham Forest Podcast, with me, Rich Ferraro, with Tom Newton and with Adam. And just before the break, Tom, you were commenting about the whole issue about bringing players in. Now, I'm going to just counter that by saying that if you look at Forest's transfer activity historically over the last few summers, it's tended to come mostly slightly later on in the summer. Now, we have signed the two Brazilians. So we've got Igor Jesus up front and we've got Jair Cunha at the back. Adam, are you excited by those signings?
Yeah, definitely. I think that, Igor Jesus I think a lot of Forest fans were very distracted by his goal record. That's not the entirety of his game. We put the thread out about him on our Twitter page, and he links the play up really well. He's a really intelligent footballer. And then Jair Cunha looked like it was kind of at one point a bit dead in the water. He had a really good Club World Cup. There was other teams sniffing around him, and it did look like that we wouldn't get him. So it's really positive. I think that centre half is someone where we probably needed a body in at the very least, especially if we may switch to the different formation, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But that's if we are going to switch, then we need more centre halves in. And then obviously striker wise, Taiwo, we've got no idea when he's going to be back. And I would go as far as saying if he's going to be back as well. And then Chris Wood, entering his season where he's going to be 34, 35, it's not sustainable long term. So I think they're the two necessary signings. And it sounds like we've paid about 20, 25 million for both, which in the modern day football terms, it is an amazing bit of business. So,
yeah. And so, Tom, coming back to the point that you were reasonably making, which is we can't end up being held to ransom. But Forest have got a reasonable record, and I'm going to say reasonable rather than good, a reasonable record of picking up players from other leagues who are able to come in and do a job. And the other thing that is, I read an article, might have been on The Athletic, which was where a director of a club was saying, in terms of knowing you're going to have players who will leave, then part of it's to future-proof. And there's a few Forest fans saying, well, Elliot Anderson is the future-proofing in case Gibbs White leaves. What do you think to that one, Tom?
Yeah, with Elliot Anderson, he had a superb under-21s tournament. And yeah, I can honestly see him doing it, but then he leaves a void in the midfield. Who do you replace him with? And if he does go into the number 10 role, he'll have to be replaced, because I just think Sangari, he finished the season really well. but you don't know if he's going to carry out that onto next season. And you've got Dominguez who's out, you've got Danilo who's might be leaving. So yeah, as soon as he moves into the number 10, he's still leaving a void in my eyes.
And I think crucially, we've got a lot more games coming up this season, and we saw how dead on their feet the squad were in the last sort of quarter of last season.
I think the plan is to actually have two squads, a bit like the Chelsea model, where they've got one squad for the Premier League and one squad for the well, it's going to be Europa League if things stay the same. But you mentioned about Forest have left it late until the transfer window, but in recent seasons, I mean, Brennan Johnson, he went near enough on the deadline day, but we've still got Elanga's left before the season's even started. Gibbs White could go down that same road. So yeah, we've got enough time to get players in, but you just want them bedded in, because last season it was like a bit different. Got Milenkovic in early on, didn't we, and a few others. So it'd be nice to actually get these players bedded in and integrate with the squad rather than like a rush job on the deadline day.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think that's one of the things that you ideally would like to see. I think the other thing that you have mentioned is, of course, that players like Dominguez and Awoniyi obviously had quite serious injuries back end of last season. On the other hand, they have both been pictured in training. So fingers crossed, even if they're not able to play football at any time soon for the start of the season, they will be there or thereabouts relatively soon. Couple of other notes. So we've signed the young player Silla from Olympiacos. I wonder how that happened, but he's just 19 years old, and it's a question as to whether he's going to play with the B team or whether he will be somebody who has potential to make it to first team level. And the other one I would say is other news from the last 24 hours is Wayne Hennessy retiring and joining the Forest coaching staff. So a big salute to him. And I did not see that coming. Let's touch upon something, Adam, that you touched upon, which is, I'm wondering then, let's say Morgan does go, and bearing in mind what Tom just said, that I've been speculating that Forest might go to 3-5-2. And partly because that's something that Nuno did at Wolves. He played 3-4-3 or 3-5-2 at Wolves. When he went to a back four there, it didn't work quite so well as it has done for Forest. But also, I think that mainly because of the midfield options that we've got. So I'm thinking Jair on the right-hand side, Milenkovic in the middle, and Murillo on the left. Obviously, we've got Aina and Williams with their new contracts as first-choice fullbacks. But then that means you can have three kind of central midfielders either playing as a 2 and a 1, two 6'8" and one number 10, or actually with a bit of defensive resolve. So as things stand, you'd imagine that would be Songare and Anderson and Yates because of the fitness and potential departure of Danilo. And then that means you can have Wood or Awoniyi up front alongside Jesus, maybe Hudson-Odoi or maybe Jota as kind of playing as slightly wider or more withdrawn strikers. That's my prediction. What do you think to that, Adam?
I could definitely see it, and I think that Hudson-Odoi is the type of player where I do actually think he could play central. I think I don't recall that he's done it before in his career. I know he played wing back before.
Well, we tried it in the FA Cup semi-final and it did not go well.
No. But I think if he's playing in behind Wood and he's given quite a free role, because I think what they'll probably end up doing is, at least at the start, you'll probably see one of Wood or Jesus in Europe and then the other one in the Premier League. And I think they'll probably do it a little bit like that, keep it quite fresh. I'd be surprised if they both start up top together. Not because I don't think it would work, but more of a sense that when you don't have a lot of players in that premium position, you don't play them together because, just on a fitness perspective. But for me, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And I'm quietly concerned, is what I'd say. I'm not absolutely losing sleep over it, but we are, halfway through July. And the issue with the Morgan situation is that you've got players like James McAtee, Harvey Elliott, Amari Hutchinson, players that Forest might be interested in that will probably end up being at another club before the Morgan stuff is sorted out. So you lose out on your primary targets. And I like the Jacob Ramsey link. I think it's nice to see his link with a player like that, and fits the Forest model of taking players from clubs that maybe are a bit underappreciated and we turn them into something more and probably sell them on. So I like that, but I think that I am concerned at the minute. I think we desperately need to kick into gear. I'm not saying that we need to go and sign 10, 15 players again, but we're playing on two fronts. And if we are playing the Europa League, we're not going to be playing teams that, respectfully, our under-21s would be. We're going to be playing teams that we're going to struggle against. We're going to be playing teams that are more on a level field to us. So we need a bigger squad.
Tom, what's your opinion on what Adam's saying? You've said you're concerned about the size of the squad. In terms of tactics and how we use the transfer market to kind of prepare for a tough season ahead, what do you think?
Yeah, with Cooney coming in, I think he'll go with three at the back. But you look at the squad, what went to Chesterfield. I know it's only Chesterfield, no disrespect, but you look at the squad, and then at the start of the summer, we had Elanga, and we still said then we still need 2 extra wingers below them to push them, because obviously Jota and Sosa not been at the. I mean, I like Sosa, but he's gone to Palmeiras. Jota's still there. Alanga's gone, so we still need 2 or 3 more wingers to replace what was missing. So, yeah, they need to get the arses into gear, don't they? Because obviously, before you know it, once they come back from Portugal, I think the season's only about 3 or 4 weeks away, isn't it? And so I think it starts around about the 17th of August. So I'm not panicking just yet, but it's a bit concerning. And by all accounts, Forest wanted Bakayoko, and he's gone to Leipzig, and he would have been ready-made for Elanga, and he's gone for we said at the start of this podcast about low fees, and I think he only went to Leipzig for 18 million.
Yeah, and we're seeing the lack of Champions League qualification is costing us with the loss of Elanga and with Morgan Gibbs White's possible departure. If we're in the Champions League, they wouldn't probably feel the need to do that. We'd be able to offer them improved contracts, and they'd be getting the exposure they want on the highest level. And let's not, the obvious factor there as well, if we go back to Tommy Tuchel basically telling players like Morgan, you need to move to a big club who are playing at the highest level, and so he wants Champions League football.
It's World Cup year, so he wants to be on that plane to the States, doesn't he? So yeah.
I want to mention there's one other rumour, and Adam, I don't know if you were aware of this. There's one other rumour that did come up, which was a player called Pepe from Porto. And Carlos got in touch with us via Twitter, and he sort of was saying, is it true that Forest are trying to sign Pepe? And he gave us a really good little bit of information, which is that Pepe's first 3 seasons at Porto are outstanding. He's been used as an attacking fullback, or he can play further in the middle of the park. He's maybe gone a little bit stale at Porto, so it's one of those things whereby actually if he needs a move to freshen him up. And although he doesn't particularly know Nuno personally, of course, Nuno's got that amazing connection to Porto as his former club. So it's one of those things whereby it's been rumoured. Who knows if it's going to happen? But Adam, I don't. As our European football correspondent, do you know much about the player?
He's really quick. He can play as a 10, can play as a winger, which is great.
Yeah. And
my only issue with him, my largest issue with him, is that he's 28, and I don't know how much they're going to want for him. I think that's kind of your larger issue. But he's very versatile, and if you go to a 3-back, then he can play wing back. He can play out wide. He can play as a 10. So he's versatile. I'm not. It's kind of the same lines as the Vissa links. I don't want to spend loads of money on players that are north of 28.
And that's the thing, isn't it? With Newcastle coming in for Johan Wissa, it's one of those things whereby if it pushes the price up, it's like, no. As much as I like Wissa, I think he'd be potentially really good signing for Forest. There's no point breaking the bank for someone who's just about to turn 29 and is going to be likely to be missing for AFCON as well in Wissa's case. So anyway, thank you very much to Tom and to Adam. I've been Rich Ferraro. We'll be back in your feeds very soon because we're going to bring you some more player interviews. And in the meantime, do plunder our archives for our 30 years on chat, our Nigel Clough interview, our football shirt chat, and we'll be back with you very, very soon.
podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.